Think about this for a second. You lived a whole life for 3 years. You learned to see, to walk, to talk. You had thousands of firsts. Your first hug, your first laugh, your first taste of food. And yet you remember? What? Nothing. Not a single second of it.
So let's get right into it, because this is a mystery that every single one of us shares. You're alive and experiencing the world for over 1,000 days. Where did all that time, all those memories just vanish to? Now, the common sense answer is that your baby brain was just too simple, right? It was like a camera without any film in it, not developed enough to record anything. But what if I told you that's not just a little bit wrong? It's the complete opposite of what actually happened. The real story is so much weirder and honestly cooler. Your baby brain wasn't failing to record your life. Oh no, it was recording. The memories were there, but then something came along and wiped the slate clean. This isn't a case of a faulty camera. This is a case where the film was recorded perfectly and then systematically destroyed. This whole phenomenon actually has a name. It's called infantile amnesia, and it was first named way back by none other than Sigmund Freud. For over 100 years, we've been trying to solve this exact puzzle. Okay, so let's put on our detective hats. The first clue in the case of your lost memories is a big one. We have definitive proof that those memories did exist in the first place. And we know this because of a truly brilliant experiment from the 1980s. Imagine this. A researcher ties a ribbon from a baby's ankle to a colorful mobile hanging over their crib. The baby quickly figures out, hey, when I kick my foot, that fun thing moves. When they're brought back to that same crib, days or even weeks later, they don't have to relearn it. They remember, and they immediately start kicking. This proved that even tiny infants can form and recall memories. So, this just blows that simple brain theory right out of the water, doesn't it? The memories were being made, the system was working, which only makes the mystery even deeper. If the memories were there, what in the world happened to them?
All right, our investigation now leads us to suspect number 1. And this one, well, it looks like it was an inside job. The first culprit seems to be the brain's own internal wiring.
The problem starts in a part of the brain called the hippocampus. You can think of it as the brain's save button. But here's the problem. In an infant, that save button isn't properly wired up to the long-term hard drive, which is the cortex. So your baby brain could make these little temporary files, like remembering to kick the mobile, but it had no way to transfer them into permanent storage. It was a massive developmental bottleneck. And that makes a lot of sense, right? A wiring issue. Case closed? No way. That's not even close to the whole picture. Honestly, what comes next is where things get really wild.
This brings us to suspect number 2, and this is the shocking twist in our story. The culprit is something you would think helps memory, not destroys it. The incredible, explosive process of brain growth itself.
Yeah, you heard me right. Back in 2014, a couple of neuroscientists proposed this radical idea. What if the very act of building a more powerful, complex brain is precisely what erased your earliest memories?
It all comes down to a process called neurogenesis, which is just a fancy term for the creation of new neurons. In your first few years, your hippocampus was basically a construction zone, just churning out new brain cells at an unbelievable rate. But there was a hidden cost. Every time a new neuron gets wired into an old circuit, it destabilizes and rewrites the connections that were already there, the very connections that were holding on to your memories.
And they proved it with this incredible experiment. First, they boosted neurogenesis in adult mice, and guess what? The mice started forgetting things they'd learned. Then, they did the opposite. They slowed down neurogenesis in baby mice, and boom, those baby mice held on to their memories for much longer. It was the smoking gun.
So let that sink in for a moment. Your baby brain wasn't too weak or too simple to remember. It was too dynamic. It was too busy growing and frantically rewiring itself. The very biological explosion that was building your mind was also overwriting its own past. But this isn't all just about the brain's hardware. That brings us to suspect number 3, which is all about the software. To have a life story, you first need a main character. You need a sense of me. We can actually see the moment this narrator appears with the classic mirror test. You secretly put a little dot of color on a baby's nose and put them in front of a mirror. Before they're about 18 months old, they'll just look at the reflection and think, hey, another baby. But after 18 months, something magical clicks. They'll look in the mirror and touch their own nose. They recognize that the reflection is me. That's the birth of self-awareness.
And that is absolutely critical. You simply cannot form autobiographical memories, the story of your life, if you don't yet have a concept of you to be the main character. Experiences were happening, sure, but there was no one home to package them into a personal story. Okay, our final suspect might just be the key that locks this whole case. It's about the very tool we use to organize our thoughts and our past, language. I absolutely love this phrase. Before you had words, your experiences were just a flood of raw data, feelings, lights, sounds. But without language to label those things, to organize them, they had no framework, no skeleton to hang on to. They were like water without a cup to hold it.
And we can actually see this in the data. The age of our first memory is different depending on our culture. In Maori culture, which has a very strong tradition of oral history, people's first memories are, on average, from when they were 2.5. In the West, it's usually closer to 3.5. So the stories our culture tells us actually teach our brains how to tell and remember our own story.
So it's time for the grand reveal. After looking at all the suspects, we can see that it wasn't a single culprit who stole your childhood memories. This was a conspiracy.
Here they are, the 4 culprits working together. 1. Your hippocampus couldn't file memories away for good. 2. That explosive brain growth was actively overwriting the old data. 3. You hadn't developed a self to be the main character. And 4. You didn't have language to give any of your experiences a lasting structure. It was the perfect storm of forgetting.
And this leads us to a really profound, kind of mind-bending conclusion. The reason you can't remember being a baby isn't that your brain was failing. It's because your brain was succeeding at a much, much more important job, the job of becoming you. And that process required the complete destruction of the person who came before. Which leaves us with one final haunting question to chew on. If the mind that had those early experiences was physically rewired beyond recognition, and if it had no sense of self that connects to who you are today, is the baby in your old photos really you? Or are they a completely different person who just happened to live in your body first? Something to think about.